Are you running with an old, outdated edition of your story that keeps you safe but limits your life to be the greatest story ever told? Of course, your story is only the greatest if it is the story that belongs to you. In this episode, we would talk about why healing entails not just changing your mind or your thoughts, but transforming your imagination. Are Filipinos truly bilingual? We use the same language at home but speak and love languages foreign to each other, together but separated. Kamusta? I'm Roanne, licensed psychotherapist mom, immigrant twice, first generation Pinoy raising my mixed Filipino-American children in America. I found that after visiting 500 Filipino homes, I continue to be a student of the culture. In this podcast, we would be seatmates in this beautiful cultural classroom. And by the way, did I tell you I need my kaping barako straight from Batangas before each class? If you're interested in learning the deep intricacies of the Filipino culture, especially as it merged with American culture, talks about trauma-informed care and deepening your Filipino relationships across generations, which includes my fave topic, Pinoy love languages, you're in the right place. This episode is brought to you by Muni Muni class. If you're not familiar with the Filipino word Muni Muni, it's one of my favorite words. It means to dream escape, to dream manifest. Join the newsletter to be updated with just drop-in classes so that you could escape and begin to manifest your highest vibration of yourself. Welcome, friends. This is Roanne Samuels, your host for the Pinoy Love Language podcast. It's been a while. Some of you may know if you receive my weekly newsletter. If not, please join if that speaks to you. But I spent almost 2 months in the motherland not too long ago as I'm recording this podcast. Today, we're talking about why healing entails changing your imagination. I will be reading parts of my blog, so there is a version of this topic, this episode, if you prefer to read it. It's linked in the show notes. There are stories that ruminate in our mind, in your mind. Are they stories passed on to you by your parents? Stories of survival by your ancestors or confidence from yesteryears? Who is the original author of the story that has become your story? It's a very important question. And often we get confused. Is that really my story? Or I've told that story long enough, which is a story told to me. And now I believe that story. I know you've heard before that the most important story is the story you tell yourself. Usually they are told in the subconscious. If your consciousness were a garden, so if you're not familiar with these two concepts, subconscious and consciousness, if it were a garden, the conscious part is the part that you see, the topsoil. So imagine your garden where things bloom or there might be weeds that manifest. The subconscious is the part of the garden that is hidden. It's under the topsoil. You can't really easily see it. What happens below the garden manifests in the topsoil. What are you growing in your garden? Something to ask yourself. And what's lurking beneath the surface of your topsoil? My friends, the best stories are the stories that express the fullest you. You know, often culture, especially in the Filipino culture, we're very collectivistic, as that comes with so many beautiful things, but also anything to the extreme, as I always say, has a shadow side. Culture, family, even your geographical positioning, have you thought about this, can influence the type of stories you consume. The problem with stories is when you simply become the character in it, rather than the creator of your own saga to be told. I love the quote that says, you create as you go, or you go as you create, right? When you're living someone else's story, their truth can become your untruth, likened to a fitting a shoe that is well fitted for someone else. But when you walk in it, it doesn't matter how good the story is. If it's not your story, that shoe could be painful because it's not the best fit for you. It doesn't belong to you. So again, I hope that's all you need, changing your story, changing your mind. But years of conditioning manufactures a lens about the world, the way you perceive the world, that you have been wearing a shoe that is painfully unfit for you. You might have been convinced, oh, but this is so beautiful. You might be given everything, right? You are well nourished, but you're emotionally hungry. In this case, it takes more than telling yourself a different story. For the stories you live, stories you believe in, have formulated your choice of words. I call that language. Language is thought, your relationship to yourself and other people. That's experience. And the picture in your imaginal mind, which is called imagination. That's the framework actually that I use. I call it the story therapy. And it's LEI, like the lei that you wear, like a Hawaiian necklace. For me, it's not enough to change just the thought or the language, but it's language, experience, and imagination. That's why it's LEI. And guess what? Just a play on letters, right? Even if it's the greatest story, but it's not your story, the LEI could become a lie, right? Let me talk to you about the power of imagination. Albert Einstein was quoted to say that imagination is more important than information. Anxiety is using your imagination to, let me see if I can say this correctly, catastrophically predict the future. That's the expertise of your brain, right? So it's looking into the future, but in a catastrophic way. Depression is using your imagination to dream about what could have been different in the past. Both utilize your imagination or the imagery in your mind. And depending on what you allow yourself to see in your mind's eye, your imagination could affect your mood, the way you interact with others, and much of your decision making. These things may not be even conscious for you. Your body can also lead the way in pivoting to a different story. So it's not just mind, just not thought, just not language. I want you to imagine this. Imagine smiling in the morning upon waking up, taking 2 minutes, right, to do your routine and uttering a personal mantra, thank you, morning, for coming again. And notice that. I know that was a quick kind of synopsis. Notice, imagine what would that do to your body. Now, imagine the scenario above, very similar, versus waking up hurriedly, rushing to the next busy thing to do, running down a checklist on your head, and even without trying or saying it, your body acts as if the coming of the morning is a curse. That's why your imagination. What are you imagining now? Notice how these two versions of starting your morning, just very quick example that I'm giving, play out in your imagination and how differently you may feel about them. This is the power of your imagination. Now, in a moment, we will come back. I'll keep continuing to talk about the power of your imagination, how to align your imagination to your desire, and some of my final thoughts. So stick around. Diyan ka lang. Ingat! If you think someone else would benefit from listening to this podcast or specifically this episode, please share. Sharing is caring. Information is meant to be shared in communal spaces, especially those that are meant to connect and to encourage healing. I'm so glad you're still here. Again, this is Roanne talking about the power of your imagination. I'm a therapist that created my own projective cards. If you don't know what that is, it's images. And the one that I have made is called Cultura cards. There are 47 cards inspired by the Filipino culture. There are no words, they're not like oracle cards, but it stimulates the imagination. I've used it even with my mom when I just traveled in the Philippines. I've used it with couples, even just in potlucks with children, but also in my therapy practice. What I love about it is that sometimes words aren't enough to describe the deep recesses of our pain, but imagery and the way we interpret is not based on anyone else. And that's what I love about using that in therapy or coaching. I am not burdened as a therapist to interpret what you see. is what is. So let's talk about one facet of trauma, okay, is that individuals who have experienced it, the trauma, seem to have left parts of their imagination in the past. Even if we're no longer there, if you've had experience, not even just trauma, but something painful, when you think about it, or perhaps you don't even want to think about it, it's as if it's happening now. You might be triggered by a scent, a particular sound, the way someone brushes off unintentionally on your arm that takes you back, your imagination, somewhere scary, dark, or uncertain. That's the power of the imagination. Now, to align your desire to your imagination, you must first allow yourself to desire something. Some people feel unworthy or not good enough, even to just imagine a life beyond the one they have. So it's very important. And maybe that's one part in which you may need support. That's why simply telling yourself another story, that's a good start, but may not be sufficient. Your imagination, which is part of your subconscious, remember that the one beneath the topsoil needs to have a buy-in to your new story that you want to tell yourself. Because you might be telling yourself, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight. You feel like you're doing the best that you can. Perhaps there is a message when you were young that you have to finish everything that's on your plate. There's guilt upon not finishing everything on your plate. And there's something beneath the topsoil that meets the eye. That's what I mean about having a buy in and aligning your imagination to your desire. For example, if you've been abused as a child and you believe you're unworthy of love, it may be a good start to tell yourself a better story. But a deeper claiming of your story is to allow your inner child to be witness. You can even get angry. Basically, sometimes we speak to our inner child as if we're adults. We're trying to make sense of things as adults. We may not understand that to actually align with our inner child, I'm thinking about if you had some negative experiences, is to actually align with the inner child, is to speak on behalf of the inner child. If you want to attend to your inner child, by the way, I have an inner child prompts. It's kind of a workbook that you get. It's 30 days. It's very creative without you having to be an artist. It's called Inner Child Playground 30 Days to Restoration. Check it out. Just sending the link in the show notes. In other words, to align your imagination to your desire, locate your desire. Be specific. Okay, how it looks like. You have to be able to envision it, touch it, and practice envisioning your desire every day. Ask yourself, who do I want to be today so that I could fulfill my desire? It takes one step every minute. A minute becomes an hour, my friends. An hour a day, a week. Okay. And if you falter, know that the next moment is always the best time to start. The person you are and the person you want to continue to create and recreate is there. Okay. Here's my final thoughts, my friends. And again, if you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, come subscribe. There's a Muni Muni class, which is a place to dream escape, to dream manifest. Come join if you feel called to do so. Here's my final thoughts, my friends. Your true story has always been you. The conditioning of family, culture, and simply being a human being exposes you to stories that bring you closer to who you are or can pull you further away than the story that truly belongs to you. I wish you, my friends, courage to actually reclaim, and it's not fully lost. Sometimes it's just forgotten. They are forgotten stories. I hope you have been well. Marami pong salamat sa pakikinig at sa ulitin. Bye now!